This is a video for you to watch if you are struggling with life here in Italy. You've reached your fill. You are stressed, overwhelmed, kind of maybe even questioning your decision to live in this country. This is the video that I want you to turn to in those moments because let me tell you, whilst Italy is a beautiful holiday destination, it's a lot trickier to live in, especially on a long-term basis. And there will be many moments during your time living in this country where you will experience challenges and difficulties. I can tell you this from first-hand experience. I have been living here in Italy now for 7 years. And let me tell you, I faced my fair share of challenges and difficult moments during the course of that time. So I know that it's very important to have a strong mindset and to be able to have things that you can turn to in those instances to help to support you through those moments so that you don't give up on your dream, but you actually find coping mechanisms and things that can support you so that you can actually start to enjoy your life in this country. Now, the first thing that you really want to be doing if you're struggling with life here in Italy is to be very mindful of the content that you're consuming. Now, for most of us, this content comes in the form of social media platforms or websites or something similar. Now, we've got to be so careful with social media because it has a way of impacting us without us even realizing it. You know, when you take your device, you take your tablet, your phone, computer, whatever it may be, and you're just seemingly mindlessly scrolling through the feed and looking at what people are posting, and you don't think it's having any kind of an impact, you're wrong. Subconsciously, that content, that post you saw very briefly for just 2 seconds is starting to scratch away at your confidence, at your character, at your life, and you don't even realize it. So you've got to be so careful of what you are consuming on the internet. Now, for me personally, I did a bit of a Marie Kondo and I basically decluttered my Instagram feed the other week, and I went through all the people I decided to follow over the course of the time I've had an account on that platform. And I was really honest with myself. Does this account bring me joy? Yes, it does. Okay, I will continue to follow you. Or has that joy now passed? In which case I thank that account for what it taught me in that moment of my life, but it's no longer resonating with me, so I'm going to unfollow it. And it was a really therapeutic process. I've got to be honest with you, because it was like when you have weeds in your garden and you pull out the weeds and you suddenly see the beauty of the flowers that were hidden up until that point. That is exactly what I've started to see now on my Instagram channel. Those accounts that once I really resonated with or meant something to me or I connected with and no longer do, not having them on my feed anymore means I've created space for the algorithm to suggest more appropriate accounts that will serve me better in this moment of my life. And one such account is what has inspired this video today. And it is an Instagram account by the name of The Mind Friend. I will link it below in the show notes because absolutely you need to follow this account. But it's run by a woman called Charlotte, and she posts content that combines psychology with entrepreneurship. And boy, oh boy, when I tell you that her stuff will hit you like a ton of bricks, I'm serious. Like literally, I consumed her content, like devoured it in the course of like an hour because I was like, this is incredible. Like this is exactly what I needed to see right here, right now. And I'm so thankful to the Instagram algorithm for suggesting it to me. And it was only able to do that because I had decluttered the old accounts that were no longer right for me in this stage of my life. So this is what you need to start doing. Really being honest with yourself. What content do you consume that doesn't make you feel good or no longer resonates with how you feel about something? Remove it, and what can you follow instead? This will make a radical difference fundamentally to the way that you feel, and the way that you feel will essentially influence all of the other things that you're dealing with in your life. Now, the rest of this video is really inspired by Charlotte's account, and I encourage you wholeheartedly to go to follow her channel. This is not sponsored by Charlotte in any way. It's just my personal recommendation because I think if I was able to take something from this, then I'm almost certain that you too will be able to as well. But I have cherry picked certain quotes that Charlotte has posted on her account that I think can really help you if you are struggling in Italy in this moment. So let's begin with the first quote that really, really hit home. The words you speak become the house you live in. Wow. Now, I have always stressed on this channel that words contain real power, and sometimes I think we don't realise just how much power is contained within them. We use words really flippantly. We don't really consider the language that we're using when we're speaking to ourselves as well as to other people. But behind every word is an energy, whether that be positive, negative, or indifferent. And I have to be honest with you, when we become aware of this, it radically changes everything. So if you're struggling with life here in Italy, no doubt the language you're using to talk about your experiences is very intense. It's very heavy and negative even. Maybe you're using words like feeling overwhelmed or stressed or, despondent or disappointed, or, you feel like giving up on this whole adventure that you had wanted for yourself. You feel like you don't have anywhere to turn. You don't know what to do. You feel flustered. There are so many different heavy, evocative words that you could use to describe a situation of struggle. However, you've got to be so careful, because if you are constantly using these terms to talk about your situation, you are slowly building a house that you end up living in. And slowly but surely, you will start to see how your life tends to match the words that you're using to describe it. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have to be very mindful of the words that you're using and also the people you are using those words with, because we all know that negativity loves company. And so if you are pairing yourself off with people who too are struggling with different aspects of life in Italy, then unfortunately it's going to be very difficult for you to distance yourself and to look at things from a different perspective, because together the negative energy is going to be intense. So this is something that I want you to consider. I want you to consider reframing your situation. Now, I mentioned this in another video, I'll link it up here, but this technique can really change what could be a very shitty situation into something that can add depth and value to your life. So if you're dealing with, I don't know, let's say bureaucracy problems, because this tends to be what most people struggle with in Italy, how can you frame those problems in a different way? And what I mean by that is, how can you look at those problems from a different perspective? Can it teach you something? Do you need to educate yourself better on the bureaucratic systems in this country? Do you need to perhaps seek the advice from a professional who can help you to understand things better? Do you need to perhaps change the sources of information that you're using to help you to understand the way processes work in this country? Or do you need to start following people who can explain this information better to you? Do you need to perhaps look at this whole experience as a growth opportunity and see it as something that can help you to become wiser in your life here in Italy and help you in future bureaucratic situations? Because trust me, the bureaucracy never ends. This is what you can do when you reframe a situation. You look at it from a different perspective, a different angle, and you take, in a way, a little bit of the sting out of the situation, and you start to see what benefit you can gain from it. I really believe that everything can teach us something, and I think it all depends how you view that situation as to the lessons that you're going to learn. So if you're struggling here in Italy, pay attention to the language that you're using to talk about your problems, and think of ways that you can frame the situation in a different way. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. There's a lot of that on the internet and in life in general, where people disguise how they're really feeling so that they don't come across as too heavy or too negative. No, I always believe that you should feel into and lean into your emotions, but you've got to kind of be dynamic with the way that you process them. It's not about staying stagnant and staying stuck in the way that you feel, but it's about using those feelings to drive you to a better place and to help you to take better steps and action that are going to support you more. So this is the first thing that you need to do. Really be mindful of the language that you're using and kind of the lessons and reframe that you can give to your difficult experience. The next quote that really rang true for me, and I think will also ring true for you if you are struggling in Italy, is, as a grown and capable adult, you are responsible at all times. Personal responsibility. I really believe in this concept, and so many people do not exercise this in their lives. Listen, let me tell you, if you're struggling with life here in Italy, there is always something you can do about it. Maybe you cannot change the processes, you cannot change the archaic systems that exist in this country, but you can change the way that you think about the situation. You can change the steps that you're taking to deal with the situation, and you can change perhaps the sources of information you're going to educate yourself about the situation. There is always something that you can do, but it's about recognizing the fact that you need to take some personal responsibility. So many people here in Italy blame external circumstances for life being difficult here. It's the government, it's the politics, it's, I don't know, the bureaucracy, it's the history of this country, whatever it may be. There are lots and lots of reasons that are often cited as being why life here is so tough. But I will tell you that everything begins and ends with you. Yes, there are so many aspects of life here that you will have zero control over, but you always have control over your own perception of an experience and the steps that you take. And this is something that I want you to remember, because you cannot control the difficulties that you'll likely face in this country, but you can certainly control how you manage them, what you decide to do about them, and the kind of life that you're going to build for yourself in this country. So never forget this. You are never out of control. There are certain things that you have to surrender, but predominantly you do have control of a situation. And so you need to look for where you can take some personal responsibility, even if it feels like a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, because you know what? Sometimes we don't like to admit that there's more we could have done in a situation, or we should have dealt with things differently. It's not easy to admit that, I know, but whatever it takes, personal responsibility will radically change your experience here in Italy, and it stops making it be about them and make it be more about you, but not in a self-deprecating way, not in a way that makes you beat up on yourself, but in a way that gives you control and power again. That is something that you need to be aiming for. Third quote from Charlotte's page that I think can really, really help you is, self-sabotage shows up right before something could change your life. Wow, it's true. So true. You know, like here in Italy, you could self-sabotage in many different ways. Maybe you've been invited to a social situation. You have an opportunity to start to build your connections, because this is something that can be tough to do here in Italy. But maybe, you know, as the event approaches and, you know, you start to organize what you're going to do, you get cold feet and you start to think, oh my goodness, nobody's going to understand me. You know, I don't have anything to talk about with these people. I don't think I'm going to enjoy myself. And the self-sabotage slowly creeps in to the point where you cancel and you don't go to the event. And then you miss out on the opportunity that could have meant that you start to build some good connections in this country. Let me tell you, self-sabotage shows up a lot here. It could be that you decline a job offer or even an interview, or you don't apply for the job at all because you talk yourself out of it thinking that you can't do it because your Italian's a bit ropey, or I don't know, you don't have the necessary skills. So many different ways that self-sabotage can creep up on you. But let me tell you, self-sabotage is there because our brain wants to protect us. Our brain is very primal in the sense that, taking it back to Stone Age times, it was all about protection and looking after yourself and your family. And so when you do something that feels like it could potentially be a risk, or something that's unknown and you don't have any previous experience of it, naturally your brain's like, attention, are you sure this is really what you want to be doing? And so as a result, you start to self-sabotage, you start to have those doubts and question yourself and be like, I don't know if I should be doing this. And before you know it, you have undone any kind of opportunity or progress that you might otherwise have made, because you think you are protecting yourself, but in reality, you're not. You are missing out on something that could radically change your life. And I've had this happen to me a lot lot, a lot in my life, but especially here in Italy as well. I had it with my YouTube channel. So self-sabotage stopped me from beginning this YouTube channel sooner than I did. I wanted to start this channel initially when I was moving here to Italy, and my friend had been encouraging me, telling me to do it, but I allowed self-sabotage to stop me. But essentially, at some point, I stopped. And even though the doubts were still there, telling me nobody's going to be interested, you're going to make a fool of yourself, rah, 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 I allowed myself to continue. And as such, this YouTube channel has quite literally changed my life. And it sounds really dramatic, but it's not, because it's given me my sense of purpose again in this country. And it was something that I felt I lost when I first moved here. And as such, I found life really difficult at the beginning. But having this YouTube channel, having this outlet, having this way to express how I'm feeling, and in a way to help you, has given me again. So, it's changed me for the better. And so this is it. Self-sabotage always rears its head when change is coming and when better things are going to come into your life. So pay attention to that self-sabotage. If you're struggling with something here in Italy, if you're talking yourself out of something that could potentially be beneficial to you, have a little chat with yourself, because usually it's because you're afraid or you're scared. But if you were to take those steps, it may change your experience and remove all that stress that you're going through entirely. And the final quote that I really want to highlight from Charlotte's page is, better to admit you walked through the wrong door than spend your life in the wrong room. Now, the reason I think this is so apt if you are struggling here in Italy is because life here in Italy isn't for everybody. And you don't know if it's for you until you actually come here and physically try it out for yourself. Sure, you can spend hours researching videos, looking on the internet, whatever it may be, but nothing beats actually experiencing it firsthand for yourself to know whether or not this is really the right experience for you. And so this is why I say to you that if you're struggling here in Italy and you've taken all of the steps that you can take to try to reframe things, to try to work on your mindset, to try to look at things from a different perspective, to try to recognize those self-sabotage moments and do something about them, to reflect on your why, and you are still struggling, then maybe it is because you have walked through the wrong door. But it's better to admit that and to have that kind of sense of, shame, because, I think there is a sense of shame when we feel like we've made the wrong decision and we realize that, rightly or wrongly, this is a natural emotion that we feel when we feel like we've done something that we shouldn't have done. But let me tell you, it's better to feel like that, however brief it may be, and then do something about it and change your life and go somewhere else or go back to the country you came from and, take the experiences from Italy with you and help it to lead you a better life in more familiar surroundings, than it is to stay forever in the wrong room and always be struggling here in Italy, always be forever miserable because you don't want to admit that maybe you made a mistake. Let me tell you, there's no sense of embarrassment with making a mistake. In fact, I think if you can admit that you make mistakes in your life, you actually become a better person and you learn something, and it means you've lived. Because let me tell you, I don't think people who go through life completely perfect ever truly live. You live when you learn through your mistakes and you try things and you see if they're for you or not, because essentially you're living a life with no regret. Regret comes from people that try to live perfectly and don't want to take risks and don't want to, make a mistake. No regret comes from being bold enough to be willing to make mistakes and to take risks. And so it's okay to say that you stepped through the wrong door. Absolutely. It's okay to admit that life here in Italy isn't for you, because imagine the regret you'd feel if you were only like if only and you've never ever tried it for yourself. So, much, much better to do that than it is to forever stay living in this country and become bitter and twisted because you realize it's not really the right place for you, but you just don't want to admit it to people because you're worried about what people think. In short, who cares? Like, people will have an opinion about you, whatever you do. So these quotes are just a selection from Charlotte's page that really hit home for me, and I think can help you if you are struggling at something here in Italy. So go and check her page out if you've not already on Instagram, because it really, really, really will change your perspective about whatever you're going through in life, whether it's connected to Italy or not. And if you've enjoyed this video, I think you'll enjoy this one next. These are some conversations that I've had over the course of 7 years here in Italy that have radically changed my life. I will see you in the next video.